By the time summer started thinning out in the high plains of Wyoming, people already knew winter would come hard and early. You could smell it in the evenings, sharp, metallic, riding the wind that rolled down from the mountains like a warning. That was when folks noticed the two kids. Ethan Miller, 13, all sharp angles and quiet resolve, and his little sister Lily, 9, small-framed with watchful eyes that seemed too old for her face. They lived on the edge of town now, on a patch of land most adults wouldn't bother with. No parents, no money, just the two of them, and the memory of their grandfather. After Grandpa Henry died the previous spring, everyone assumed the kids would be sent away. Foster care, distant relatives, anywhere but here. But Ethan had other plans. Instead of packing up, he started digging. Neighbors slowed their trucks to stare. What they saw didn't make sense. Scrap metal hauled in on a borrowed trailer, old curved steel panels half buried into the hillside, stones stacked with careful intention. No logs, no proper fireplace, no roof peak like every cabin in the county had. Looks like a culvert, someone muttered at the feed store. Kids are building their own grave, another said, not unkindly, just honest. Ethan heard it all. He didn't answer. He kept working. Every night, when Lily asked if they were doing the right thing, he told her the same thing Grandpa used to say. Corners steal warmth. The ground remembers heat. Build with the land, not against it. Grandpa Henry hadn't been a rich man. He wasn't educated either, but he'd survived winters that broke grown men. He taught Ethan how cold really worked, not like a storybook enemy, but like something patient and ruthless, something that punished mistakes. So Ethan trusted those lessons more than the whispers of adults who never stopped to help. They worked until their hands were raw. Ethan dug while Lily carried stones from the creek, her breath puffing white in the cooling air. At night, they slept wrapped in blankets under the stars, the unfinished structure looming beside them, strange, curved, and lonely. By the time the first snow dusted the ground, the house stood sealed. It didn't look like a home. It didn't look safe. And yet, as Ethan watched Lily fall asleep inside for the first time, the wind howling uselessly outside, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not confidence, hope. And in Wyoming, hope going into winter was either foolish or the only thing that ever saved you. The house stood finished, but the work didn't stop there. As September slipped into October, the nights grew longer and sharper. The wind pressed against the curved walls, searching for cracks that weren't there. Inside, the air stayed still, almost watchful. Ethan noticed it first. The quiet felt different, not empty, contained. That was when Grandpa Henry's voice started coming back to him. Not in dreams, in moments. When Ethan packed clay between stones, he remembered his grandfather kneeling beside an old fire pit, hands black with soot. "Fire's loud, heat's quiet," Henry had said. "If you want warmth to stay, don't let it run off screaming." Henry had raised them after their parents died. He never used big words, never explained why things worked, only how. On cold mornings, he'd make Ethan put his bare hand on stone warmed by yesterday's fire. "Feel that," he'd say. "That's memory. Stone remembers." So Ethan built the heater the way Henry showed him. Small, tight. No roaring flames, just a short, fierce burn that fed heat into brick and rock, letting it sink in slow and deep. Lily helped, handing him stones, brushing dirt from their edges like they mattered, which they did. Sometimes she asked questions. "Why not a bigger fire? Why no chimney like the others?" Ethan always gave the same answer. Because Grandpa said big fires waste themselves. At night, Lily curled up on the stone bench they'd built along the wall. She pressed her palms to it, smiling when the warmth crept back hours after the fire died. That smile made every blister worth it. People still came by. Mrs. Carter from down the road brought a loaf of bread and a look full of worry. "You kids sure you don't want to stay in town once it gets bad?" Ethan thanked her and said they were fine. Mr. Dawson laughed outright. "Metal will freeze you solid, you'll see." Ethan didn't argue. Grandpa had taught him something else too. You don't convince winter with words. By mid-October, frost clung to the grass every morning. Lily started coughing at night, soft and dry. Ethan lay awake listening, counting her breaths, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down harder than the cold. But inside the house, the stone stayed warm longer each night. And every time the wind screamed and failed to get in, Ethan felt it, Quiet, steady proof that Grandpa Henry hadn't just left them land and memories. He'd left them a way to survive. The first real cold hit in early November, the kind that didn't knock politely. It kicked the door in. Overnight, the temperature dropped fast, the wind turning vicious, scraping across the plains like it had teeth. Trucks wouldn't start. Water buckets froze solid before sunrise. By morning, frost had crawled up the inside of windows all over town. Ethan felt it before he checked the thermometer. The air outside bit through his jacket the second he stepped out to split kindling. His fingers went numb in minutes. Winter wasn't testing anymore. It was making demands. Inside the house, Lily sat cross-legged on the stone bench, wrapped in an old quilt, watching him build the fire. Her eyes followed every move, quiet, trusting. "You nervous?" she asked. Ethan didn't lie. "Yeah, a little." He lit the fire the way Grandpa Henry taught him. Not too much wood. Space for air. Let it burn hot, not long. The flames roared for a while, sharp and bright, then faded down to glowing coals. By bedtime, the fire was gone. That part scared Ethan the most. In other houses, fires burned all night. Men got up half asleep to feed them, over and over. Here there was nothing but stone and memory. Ethan lay awake listening. The wind slammed into the curved walls, slid along them, and moved on, frustrated. No whistling cracks, no cold fingers sneaking in. The house didn't fight the storm. It let it pass. Hours went by. Lily slept, her breathing slow and even. Ethan touched the stone beside her, still warm. Not hot, just steady. By morning, the world outside was locked in white. The thermometer read 8 degrees. Ethan expected the inside to feel thin, brittle, barely holding on. Instead, it felt calm. Not cozy, not soft, but livable. Lily stretched and smiled. "It worked," she said, like she'd never doubted it. Word traveled fast in a small place. At the general store, men talked about frozen pipes and burning through wood faster than planned. Someone asked Ethan how his metal cave was holding up. "It's fine on it," he said. They laughed, not mean, just certain winter hadn't finished speaking yet. That night, the temperature dropped again. Ethan burned the same small fire. He counted the pieces of wood, listened to the wind, felt the stone give heat back like a slow heartbeat. Fear didn't disappear, but something else took its place. Confidence, not loud or proud, but earned. Because winter had made its first move. And the house hadn't backed down. January didn't arrive gently. It came down hard from the north, dragging silence behind it. The radio at the general store crackled with warnings. Temperatures dropping fast, wind chills dangerous. Folks told to stay inside and keep fires burning through the night. By sundown, the world outside Ethan and Lily's house had turned brittle. Snow squeaked under boots. Breath froze midair. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was lethal. That evening, Ethan checked the thermometer twice. 35 below. His stomach tightened. This wasn't the cold Grandpa Henry used to talk about like a challenge. This was the kind that punished mistakes without mercy. Inside, the house felt smaller somehow. Not cramped, but focused. Ethan built the fire carefully, hands steady even though his chest felt tight. Same routine, same amount of wood. He didn't let fear change the rules Grandpa had drilled into him. The fire burned fierce and bright, then died back. By early evening, only warmth remained, soaked deep into stone and brick. No flames, just trust. The wind howled outside like something alive, slamming into the hillside, clawing at the walls. Ethan lay awake, counting seconds between gusts, listening for sounds he didn't want to hear. Cracks, whistles, failure. Lily slept curled beside the warm stone bench, her face relaxed, unaware of how close the edge felt to Ethan. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, weak, desperate. Ethan was on his feet instantly, heart pounding. He opened the door to find Mr. Dawson, the same man who'd laughed weeks earlier, slumped forward, his beard rimmed with ice, eyes glassy from cold. His truck had died on the road. He'd walked nearly a mile in the dark. Ethan pulled him inside without a word. There was no fire burning, and yet within minutes color crept back into the man's face. He sank onto the stone bench, shivering, easing as the stored warmth did its quiet work. His eyes moved around the room, confused. How's it warm in here?" he whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He handed him a mug of hot water and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Outside, the cold screamed. Inside, the house held. By morning, word spread faster than the frost. The kids were still alive. The strange house still stood. And for the first time, the town stopped laughing and started wondering what else they might have been wrong about. When the cold finally loosened its grip, it didn't feel like victory at first. It felt like exhaustion. The worst of January passed, and February followed with fewer screams in the wind and longer stretches of quiet. People stepped outside again, counting what winter had taken: dead livestock, empty woodpiles, cracked pipes, nights spent shivering no matter how close they sat to the fire. And then there were Ethan and Lily. Their house still stood, half buried in the hillside, looking just as strange and uninviting as it had in the fall. No smoke pouring from a chimney, no stacks of split logs shrinking by the day, just two kids still living. People began stopping by, not out of pity anymore, but curiosity. They came with questions disguised as small talk. How often do you burn wood? Doesn't the metal freeze? Are you really warm at night? Ethan answered honestly. No bragging, no speeches. He showed them the stone bench that stayed warm long after the fire died. He explained what Grandpa Henry had taught him, the way a lesson gets passed down when it's earned the hard way. Some adults listened quietly. Others shook their heads, trying to hold on to what they'd always believed. But belief is a fragile thing after a winter like that. One man admitted he'd burned through nearly all his firewood by February. Another said his kids slept in coats most nights. A woman pressed her hand to the warm stone and didn't pull it away right away. That was when it changed. Not overnight, not all at once. But the laughter never came back. Spring arrived slow and muddy, the snow pulling back inch by inch. Ethan started repairing tools for neighbors. Lily went back to school full-time, her cough gone, her laugh easier. The house that was supposed to kill them had done the opposite. It had kept them steady when everything else failed. Someone asked Ethan once if he thought his grandpa had been some kind of genius. Ethan thought about it for a long moment. He just paid attention, he said, to cold, to heat, to what worked. That answer lingered. Because the truth was uncomfortable, the solution had been there all along. It didn't come from money or modern systems or doing things the way they'd always been done. It came from respect for the land, for experience, and for lessons people stopped listening to because they sounded too simple. So here's the question for you. How many ideas do we dismiss today because they don't look right? How often do we ignore quiet wisdom because it doesn't come from the right voice or the right place? Ethan and Lily didn't survive winter because they were lucky. They survived because they trusted something deeper than tradition, understanding. And sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who know exactly how to endure. If this story made you think or feel or question what you thought you knew, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Because the stories that matter most aren't always the loudest ones. They're the ones that stay warm long after the fire goes out.